Blocking the windows.
Oh, okay. We'll cut it open here.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. It's good?
Yeah.
You have, wow,
Lots
three
of
guns.
Oh wow. This is looking very violent
Yeah.
here. These are all-
Yeah.
If a gun rack, you need to go to the south and put it on the back of your truck.
Be safe, not jihadis. Be safe.
Yeah. Now it turned against me. I don't like this.
The good thing is that he wants to shoot monsters.
Oh, good. Not people. Well, I'm from Alabama, and we do have guns that
I would be
only
concerned
shoot
if he
monsters
wanted,
usually, but
I would be concerned if he started wanting to shoot old ladies. But, as long as it's monsters on that.
that's fine. Abstract violence.
Left for dead.
Oh, Left 4 Dead. Oh.
No, that's the name of the game.
Okay.
Oh, you thought he told me that you did?
And meet like yesterday, the same.
Maybe you can move a little bit. I move a little bit to the right.
And my and left.
A little bit to the left.
All
Like
three
this?
shotguns. All three
That's the
guns.
name of a game that his older brother plays. One of these, typical American shooting games, Japanese made or something.
Okay.
So his big thing is, well, why does his brother get to do it? And of course, it's because his brother is about 20 years old. So
Okay.
it's not exactly like I can't tell him what to do.
Do you need anything else?
No, thanks. All right,
Is
huh?
it your son, the older brother?
Yeah, both are.
Really?
Yeah.
You both have a
I'm the
20-year-old
old
son.
person. Grace is much
Oh,
younger
okay.
than I am.
Okay.
So I have a son that's 20, and Mido is 4.
That's a big gap between children, huh?
Yeah.
So he's staying. I mean, your first son is in America now.
Yeah, he's grew up in California. Most of you, he was born in Pennsylvania, but he's as American as you can get. He's just very American. But the thing I do like about that is that the U.S. is the only home he knows. It's the only country he knows, and so it's his homeland. He loves it. He's emotionally, intellectually attached to it, and he's also at the same time, so he responds at a very different level when people attack his Muslim heritage and his Muslim identity. He doesn't respond like an embarrassed outsider or a threatened outsider. He responds like an entitled insider.
Yeah. That sounds familiar for me. Not that no, I mean I know the personality.
Yeah.
I know the identity type.
It's like it's
It's also your experience.
it's like
It's not me, but
it's it's
people.
he's definitely a different. There was some guy standing in a very posh area of LA giving one of these lectures out in the parks about how Islam is an evil religion and Muhammad is a child molester, and he did something that I would never do. I mean, he's not Mr. Religion or particularly pious, but to him it's a matter of self-assertion, self-identification of who you are as a human being. So he confronted the guy in public and started arguing with him in front of people, and this is completely this is not something would not occur to me, or it's not it would occur, but I would not do it. It's this type of So who knows? Maybe it's for the better.
He's studying in university or something?
Yeah, he's specializing in psychology.
Oh, so. Okay.
Before I just came, we had like a major problem, and then we made up while I'm here. So typical.
When you're 20, that's the kind of
It's
thing.
a very American thing.
You and your dad.
Yeah. You just can't. It's a different world.
Yeah.
Well, yesterday we left off, I think, at a very important point that we didn't really get an opportunity to address, and that is the lived experience of so many Muslims. You know, when they hear about all this intellectual tradition and so on, well, immediately they compare it to their own experience with the shuyukh or whoever stands for the shuyukh today, and they'll say, but nothing of this tradition we find in our interactions with quote unquote the clergy of today, and this is certainly true, but part of the deception of texts is that they bridge time. They're like a time machine, and in this abridgment of time, all types of subtleties are lost, and all types of lived realities are lost. So it is very easy to read a text and then try to find the representative of that textual tradition in a contemporary reality. But the representative of that textual tradition in a reality hundreds of years later, at least a couple of hundreds of years, if not more, are a very poor representation of their predecessors. I mean, if you even just think of some obvious facts, we know that today those who go in being clergy is an upward mobility venue for people from rural areas. That's how a lot of rural people achieve some type of social respectability and so on. But it does not attract the brightest or the most gifted or the most creative or ambitious. So the social dynamics of the profession itself has shifted. And today, when someone is smart, they're not drawn to the madrasa, but they will be drawn to the universities, to the secular universities, and so that's one part. The other part is that there is no question that that there has been a collapse. We talk about the Roman Empire or Roman civilization of 1,000 years, and then it collapsed. That's the nature of civilizations. They go and they collapse. And there no question there's been a collapse. And the collapse is helped along by an invader, but it also, the collapse opens up the door to the invader. I mean, it's not one or just simply one or the other. And in that collapse, often the primary obsession of those, yes, of those who confront the disaster of the collapse is the mere preservation of what they have, not exploration and investigation. And so, just if you look at the rise of Islamic civilization, it is replete with Muslim explorers who travel to China and write about their travels to China. We have, of course, Hayy bin Yaqzan, who travels to Anglo-Saxonia, right? And he fights with the Anglo-Saxons against the Vikings. And and he teaches the Anglo-Saxons and the Vikings are actually not demons, which is very fascinating because they thought they were demons. And he goes back and to eventually, and he reports about these strange, barbaric, backwards people, etc., etc. We have, of course, the very famous people like Ibn Battuta and so on, but it is the travel diaries of Muslim explorers, just whether it's China, India, Africa. This is this is a civilizational attitude where you're opened up and you want to learn. It's like, I want to know. Now, when the Islamic civilization has crumbled, you find this attitude had shifted to the West. It is. So let's take just a very simple example. Timbuktu, okay? One of the legends of the medieval world. Although Timbuktu was the center of a whole empire, the Malay Empire, and which eventually crumbles, it was all these stories about how it's a city of gold and this and that, and the European, as their civilizational trajectory is going upwards, they get the same bug, the same infection that Muslims have gotten centuries earlier, where they want to discover. And so we have, I forgot the name of the explorer that went the first. He was a Scottish man, visited the first one to visit Timbuktu, and when you read his journey through the desert, and that he's traveling with a broken jaw and a partially cut windpipe, and you have to know what is driving those people. I mean, it's so mind-boggling that they would. But it is this sense of optimism, sense of confidence, sense of empowerment, sense of autonomy, sense of freedom, sense of it's as if the world is yours and your paradigm is not one where you are on the defensive. You are intellectually on. You are in a daring mode, and so the Europeans in as late as 18th century, quote unquote, rediscovered Timbuktu. Actually, there was there's an institute in Scotland. No, it wasn't Scottish. It was just simply a British institute that set a great reward for the first non-Muslim to reach Timbuktu. They knew that Muslims had reached Timbuktu and had been in Timbuktu and so on. So why do I mention Timbuktu? Because Timbuktu is actually a really good archaeological example. We know that Timbuktu is accounts of the university in Timbuktu and the libraries of Timbuktu are dazzling. Okay? And here in the 13th century is when the great leader Musa makes his pilgrimage passing through Egypt, and the Egyptians are dazzled by how rich and so on. But a very important part of this whole narrative is that the university in Timbuktu, in its records, that as much as 25,000 students from all over the world are studying in the school in the 13th century. 25,000 in the medieval era is a mind-boggling number. And its library, no one knows how many manuscripts were held in its library. I've read very conservative estimates of 1.5 million manuscripts. But we know from European accounts of that have reached Timbuktu or even visited or studied in its schools is that it was a center where philosophy and science and arithmetics and art and law and theology and was all studied, and there would be numerous famous professors and numerous famous students that came out of this and so on. Now, if you visit Timbuktu today, you're struck by something amazing. Okay? You cannot imagine that this is a Timbuktu that you read about in books. It is a complete collapse to the point that the libraries themselves are no longer there. The physical structure of the libraries, one of the very few structures that you find that goes back to the age of knowledge is the mosque, which was built in the 12th century, I believe. So that's 6 Hijra. That's long after the so-called closing of doors of Ijtihad and so on, right? 6th, 7th Hijra. And now when you start, of course, my obsession in life and my privilege and my burden, when you start trying to investigate about manuscripts, okay, so you read account of all these libraries and all these books, and including Greek philosophy and arithmetic and remarkable works that some of them have been lost to human civilization and so on. So you say, okay, where? I mean, the libraries are gone, but where did the manuscripts go? Well, I've found out that only about 150,000 manuscripts have been restored or preserved. And out of the 150,000, only 1 or 2 have been published. Okay? Now, what I then discovered is that the various tribes whose roots go back to Timbuktu, when these libraries collapsed, partly through internal fighting, partly through the colonial invaders, the libraries no longer were taken care of and ignored and so on. Various chieftains of various tribes became so worried about the books that they went and they took the manuscripts, put them in boxes, and buried them in the desert. And till today, you can go, and if the chief of the tribe trusts you, they will go in the night, dig in certain locations, and they bring out these craters, and they're full of unbelievable manuscripts. Just mind-boggling manuscripts. And of course, they're not stupid. They know that these manuscripts are decaying, so sometimes they're convinced to turn them over to one of the preservation. But one of the things that struck me very much is that they always tell you, our manuscripts are more valuable to us than our gold. The gold went to Morocco or went to the Spaniards or we don't care. But our manuscripts, we buried our manuscripts so they won't be pillaged by the colonial powers. Because of course, in typical colonial fashion, they were lifting everything from pharaonic remains to Sumerian remains to Islamic, everything was being shifted to the center of the universe, Europe, and which is fine, but notice to what extent this is a very telling and powerfully demonstrative example. The university, we are told, had the best minds, attracted the best minds, it was a status symbol. in the same way that the status symbol that you be a professor at Azhar, it was a status symbol to be a professor at Timbuktu or be a student at Timbuktu, etc., etc. And that we are told that these think of the medieval age, 25,000 students. And we have accounts that still survive of people from the Latin world traveling to study at Timbuktu or study at Cairo. And I mean, there's replete with such accounts. And even learning Arabic as a critical tool to the study of modern sciences, whatever the modern sciences are defined as. But look at the transformative mode now. The mode has become one of defensive protectionism, preservation. So they're preserving the manuscripts, but to what extent? They are the keepers of the tradition in a sense, yes. But are they the representatives of the tradition? No. And this is why I often, I mean, when students, when I was after memorizing the Quran and memorizing hadith with certain chains of transmission, and I realized something is that this whole, but this was much later on in my life, that this whole bar of memorization, i.e. preservation, excluded so many bright and intelligent people. You know, so many bright people who just thought, you know, why we have books, you know, why do we have to keep, why is it everything is about, you know, this rote memorization, and but then the further step is that you realize that as if you're gifted or intelligent or so on, is that the preservers of this tradition really don't represent the tradition anymore. I mean, for many years, all my teachers that were teaching me to memorize had no substantive knowledge of what Amidi said, or what Shatibi said, or what Ibn Hazm said in his usul, or you know, or someone like Ibn Nujaym, who's, you know, said this remarkable thing where he said that at times it is appropriate to ignore a textual command for a higher cause, and yet Ibn Nujaym wrote a huge work on usul al-fiqh, and very, I mean, it's preserved, yes, but how many of them had engaged it? Very few. But even those who at the later stage after memorization, you read upon sheikhs. So the sheikhs, literally, you read the sheikh to the text, and the text to the sheikh, and the sheikh corrects you. But the whole dynamic is it is as if it's an exercise in habit, because there are no and there's no potential. I mean, it's like a lot of my family members used to tell me, it's like, okay, instead of excelling in school and getting, you know, topping your class at your high school and so on, you go and you waste all this time with shuyukh and so on. What's that going to do? I mean, what ultimately are you going to end up leading prayer in some mosque? I mean, that's your ambition. And how much money are you going to make as someone leading prayer in a mosque? Yes, you definitely realize that a lot of the people who are with you are there because they are the lowest common denominator in society, not the most. Not the middle or even the highest common denominator. And then when you get to the point of actually finding those who are engaging the tradition in a more authentic fashion, you have something that is, again, nearly a tradition, but that tradition is sort of been targeted quite intentionally by the Puritans, is that it surprises a lot of people, for instance, to know that part of my training, or part of the training of Ahmad, the fellow who I met in Notre Dame, who's teaching a master class here, he's a professor at Santa Barbara, or the training of Hussein Mudarrisi, or so on, was to study abstract mathematics, to study logic, to study eloquence, to say, and it was, all of these were required disciplines, and as I was going through them, there were many times where I thought, well, okay, why am I studying logic? Why am I studying mathematics? But notice that the institutional shift, while Azhar preserves the texts on logic and mathematics and medicine and all of that, but it is greatly frowned upon to teach these texts anymore. So, to what extent are the keepers of the tradition, the representatives of the tradition? I think we have to differentiate. There's a big difference between the keeper of the tradition, who's like a computer, literally, just preserving, and the representative of a tradition, and that's a far more substantive issue. Another very important point is that imagine if, right now in an American law school, we have a certain style of teaching that's based on posing queries and critical analytical thinking and so on and so forth. But that tradition is already just 200 years. It's just been 200 years into American history, and it's already under assault. It's already, there are those technocrats who say our students should just be taught what the law is, not to think about what the law ought to be. Their job is to execute the law, not to analyze and innovate or create or so on and so forth. And when I imagine if the political circumstances and economic circumstances shifted to such an extent that some of the most in the United States there are about over 130 law schools, right? Some of the law schools are not even accredited, and you get the whole range between top stellar minds to law schools that are on the fringe, that accept very mediocre students, engage in very mediocre training, and produce very mediocre lawyers, right? What if the political circumstances became such that through some process American law just simply became not relevant anymore, and all the people who used to populate the top law schools left to another tradition, whatever that tradition is. And all that remained were the law schools that used to be ranked in the fourth tier. Sort of like when you're applying to law schools, you try to get accepted in the top 10, if not the top 10, then the top 20, and then at the first tier, and if not the first tier, say, by the time you get to the fourth tier, you're just like, you're an idiot. And your professors are idiots. They're just nothing to their, and it just a very mechanical process on. But then what happens when you've got this in history of institutions and history of educational institutions, where then suddenly the fourth tier or the third tier becomes all there is. Okay? can we say that a professor today, for instance, in Pacific Western Law School or Tulane Law School,